Happy Sunday, everyone. Well, you know that you had a good weekend when you're so exhausted. I hope that you all had a great weekend. And today, what I want to talk about is what do you do when you are stuck in a role that doesn't bring you joy? I built my executive career. I climbed up the ladder to the director level, and I believe that the reason I was successful is based on a few ingredients. And today I want to talk about these ingredients because I know that if you are listening, whether you are at the director level, the VP level, someone who has more than 15 years of experience, you're thinking about leaving your current situation. But the reason you are not able to leave is because you don't have options. And so today I'm going to talk to you about how you can create those options for yourself, even if you feel that you don't have a network. I know that a lot of you feel like it's impossible for you to land an executive role because the way you land an executive role is different than someone who is mid-level. Mid-level, you can apply for jobs, but even with mid-level, it's difficult to just apply cold and land a role these days because that channel is quite saturated. So I'm going to share with you my story of how I did it, how I left my country of birth. I didn't have a network, I didn't know anyone, yet I was still able to build my leadership career. And I will also give you examples of clients that I've helped so that you can learn from their stories and learn from the steps and the framework that I'm going to share with you. So, first things first, I'm going to start with my story. So, in 2018, I actually quit over text. It was crazy. I was frustrated. And a lot of it is because I felt disrespected. I felt that the organization didn't value me because they had a peer who was less experienced than I was, pretty much in a way a little bit ahead of, like they kind of we were kind of the same level, but I was reporting to him in one of the initiatives, and it was so frustrating because I don't know about you, have you ever been in a situation where you have created so much value for the organization, you created results, you brought in, revenue, but you keep getting feedback that you're not ready to get promoted. Maybe you're being told that you don't have executive presence. Maybe they keep, bringing in another metric for you to meet. And no matter how much you put in, it's not enough. And so I was in that situation, and it was crazy because one of the initiatives, I pretty much brought in over $3 million into the organization just by saving the contract. Um, and that was hurtful when I was constantly told that, hey, everything you're doing is great on paper. You are very competent at what you do. But then they would bring in some reasons that just didn't make sense, that were quite subjective. Okay, so what happened was, in the end, I got so frustrated, I quit over text. The actual story is that I live in Toronto, and in Toronto downtown, you don't really need a car. So I was a bit of a late bloomer, and I got my driver's license late. And I remember leaving to do the exam, and the peer who was who was like supposedly I'm reporting into in the initiative, he ended up undermining me. He rescheduled all of my meetings without talking to me, and I felt disrespected. And it wasn't just that incident. So it was just like everything just accumulating, and that was just the nail that broke the camel's back. So yeah, I quit over text, I left, and afterwards I took a couple of contracts, and I realized that, what, I want to help people like me people who are new, to the country, or people who don't have a network build their career. So the irony is, yes, I actually did build my career and was successful, even though I wasn't necessarily happy. And I did that without having a network, because at the age of 18, I actually came to Canada alone with 2 suitcases. So I didn't have any family. I didn't have a network. I didn't know people. And I somehow navigated from one organization to another just by applying and not knowing anyone. So I kind of had this knack. I had this knack of building my brand. I was really good at it. And I was really good at, creating a reputation for myself so that people would constantly come to me, refer me to opportunities. But what skyrocketed that skill set was when I actually started my business. So a lot of people think, well, easy for you to say, you have a business. It doesn't work the same way when you're landing a job, but it's actually not true. There are a lot of coaches out there who have trouble generating leads and who have trouble building their brand. And if you think about it, it's actually harder as someone who's a business owner to land jobs, because I don't apply for jobs. There's no way for me to apply. There's no way for me to say, hey, I'm a business, come to me. I actually have to rely on building my brand on LinkedIn. And the way people find me is they see my content, they come across my profile. I have referrals. It really requires relationship building, which is the same skill set that I teach my clients. So I'll share with you guys a story of a client who was at the director level and she got laid off. She was looking for 6 months at that point, and she came to me. She tried everything. She hired a resume writing company, paid them over $2,000 just for the piece of paper, and they still weren't able. They built a resume for her that was just did not represent who she was, and she still didn't land a role. She was getting frustrated. Her finances were being depleted. And then that's when she came to me. And so what we ended up doing, well, the first thing that I noticed about this client, and it's actually something that I notice in a lot of executives who tell me that they don't have a network, who tell me that they're not getting traction, they are not clear of their value. And don't say to me that, no, I know my value, I know what I want. You may say that, but if you and I were to sit down together, I will guarantee you that you're minimizing your value, because if you weren't minimizing your value, you would be getting opportunities knocking on your door. Believe me. So with this client, she was minimizing her value. She was making herself small. Like her friends, her past colleagues were telling her, maybe you should lower your expectations. Maybe you should apply for senior individual contributor roles. The market is bad. The thing is, when you hear that narrative constantly, at some point you start believing it. Also, almost every talented person that I've worked with, and I've worked with over 1,000 professionals, tend to underestimate their value. It's the curse of the expert. When you're so good at what you do and it comes so naturally to you that you start minimizing it. And so your perception of yourself becomes distorted. And this magnifies when you've been in a toxic environment. Think about it. If you were in a, let's say, toxic romantic relationship and you had a partner who's constantly putting you down, who's constantly, pointing out your flaws, at some point you start believing it, even if it's not true. So it's the same thing with being in a environment where you're constantly being critiqued and you're being told that hey, yes, you delivered this initiative, but you could have done better. Oh, you delivered this initiative. Thank you very much, but you lack executive presence, and this is why we're not going to promote you. And when you start seeing someone else get promoted who's not as confident as you are, you start questioning. You're like, maybe I'm crazy. Like, I know this person is not as experienced as I am, but why would they promote them versus me? Right? And so you start questioning yourself. And that causes you to have that distorted view of your own value. And when you have that distorted view of your own value, recruiters can sense it, and it starts translating to all of your brand assets, your resume, your LinkedIn profile, the way you speak to recruiters, the way you network. It is a cascading effect. And so when I work with my clients, it's not that they're bad communicators. They're amazing individuals. They would not be in the roles that they're in if they weren't amazing at what they do. And so what we work on isn't necessarily the tactical things. Yes, we work on the resume and all this stuff, but where we start is the root cause, which is the way that they see their value. We correct it. And so as someone who is on the outside, I bring in that fresh perspective, mainly because I have the context. I've been in the corporate world for more than 15 years, and I'm able to ask the right questions to understand what each of my executive clients have done in their career. And sometimes it feels messy, very messy, because you've done so much. Maybe you've had a nonlinear career, and we literally have to organize it so that we can see the thorough line, so that we can connect the dots, and then figure out what your sweet spot is. So with my client, Stephanie, she was going through imposter syndrome, and she was in a weird role at her organization. Like, she was given the title of engineering director, but what she was doing was actually not engineering. And so she started getting confused because she was literally translating her title to what's out there. And recruiters kept telling her, you're not technical, you're not an engineering leader. And she was not, converting her interviews into offers. And so what we corrected was how her experience translated to the market and her value proposition. And it turns out that she is more of a product person than an engineering leader. And so once we helped her see how she fits into the market, she felt so much better. Now, there was still that little bit of self-doubt because, when your company has put you in this box for a long time, it's very difficult to believe, that you fit somewhere else. But when we worked together and we rebuilt her brand and we went through all of her stories and talked through them, she started realizing that it's true. So here's the thing. You can sit down and you can do this self-discovery and you can go on ChatGPT and talk to it. But the reason, it's almost impossible to figure it out on your own is because there's an emotional aspect to this, which a chat bot is not going to help you with. And here's the thing. The chat bot can take you on a rabbit hole in a very wrong direction because the chatbot, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever you're using, is going to validate you. And the inputs that you're giving it may be the wrong inputs. And so all it's going to do is it's going to confuse you. That actually happened with a client of mine who also recently came to me. She spent a month trying to figure out what she wanted to do. And guess what? A month later, still nothing. She got even more confused. She thought that she was going to land a role. Like, initially she came to me and she said, I want to land a role in a month. And I said, okay. And then she said, but you know what? I'm going to just, try to get the clarity on my own. She thought that she was going to get that clarity in less than a month and land the role in less than a month. But a month later, as she was trying to figure it out, brainstorm, go through her experience, feed ChatGPT her resume, she came up with like 3 avenues, but she could not decide. And it prevented her from applying for jobs because of that indecision. So this is why it is very difficult to do this on your own, because it is an emotional journey. You need to talk to someone. It's almost a therapeutic process. It's like, have you tried using ChatGPT as your therapist? Oh my God. ChatGPT as a therapist, or even Claude, so terrible. Well, Claude actually, I don't want to talk to Claude about my feelings because Claude is so mean. And ChatGPT just validates everything. And it just makes you have all these assumptions. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, with my client Stephanie, after we build her brand, she actually, guess what? Not only did she did not actually land a director role. Do you guys know what role she landed? Take a guess. Put it in the chat. Guess what kind of role she landed? She was told that she would not be able to land a director level role. She was told that, whatchamacallit, that she should apply for senior individual contributor role. After working with me, she landed a VP role at a larger company. So, some of you might think, well, maybe she landed a VP role at a smaller company. That's why she moved up. No, she actually landed at a larger company, owns a larger mandate, moved up to VP level. This is what happens because 80% of the root cause that prevents people from making the change in their career is emotional. It truly is. Edward, you have a question. Doesn't that encourage us to build into any queries and reinforce them to, instead of having an AI assistance, be initially prompted with providing potentially the harshest or least faithful read of what you feed it? If Claude is too mean and GPT validates everything, doesn't that speak to the core model and baseline programming and boundaries so we can modify that? Okay, my friend. I love that you are participating and thank you for sharing. I'm going to try to understand your question. Okay, so why do people see a human therapist and not an AI therapist? I don't think that the models have developed the ability yet, maybe they will in the future, to have deep empathy. Okay? The process of making a career change, people mistake it to thinking that I need a resume, as long as I have a template, as long as I have a solid job search, as long as I'm networking, then I'm going to be able to navigate a career change. Again, I've been doing this for 6 years now. It's going to be 7 years in April. And I've worked with over 1,000 professionals. I have been, running this business pre-AI and post-AI. And I will tell you guys that as someone who also used to be in the transformation space and used to be an agile coach, which again is all about change and helping organizations navigate change. You can call me a change expert if you think about it. Change is a deeply emotional aspect. When you introduce change to any situation, people fear loss of control. People attach their identity. They resist change. And so to me, what people need support with isn't necessarily the clinical aspect of what are the steps I need to take. It's more like, oh my God, what if this doesn't work? What if I fail? What if, how do I prioritize? These are the things people struggle with. So yeah, when I use these models, these LLMs, and I ask them all these questions, I don't feel that the models are savvy yet to understand the nuances. And sometimes they exaggerate a situation. I'm going to see if I can think of an example to explain this. Actually, I can think of one off the top of my head. So the company where I quit over text, I was just messaging my boss, like my ex-boss today, and he was telling me that he worked so hard for a whole month that he wasn't sleeping. He wasn't sleeping. He was so burnt out. He had to take an entire month off work. Tell me, someone who's going through that state, do you think an LLM would be helpful in that situation? Not really. You need a human to talk to when you're going through that situation. You need someone who is going to make you feel heard, empathize with you, and you kind of need to establish a relationship with that person to feel comfortable with them in order to, basically accept their advice. The accountability is just not the same with the ChatGPT and Claude. So that's really my perspective. Of course, if some of you feel like the LLMs are helpful in these situations, that's up to you, right? But the types of clients that I work with, they value the human aspect. They don't want to speak to an LLM. They're very busy professionals, and they want someone who's going to keep them from wasting their time trying to fix the wrong things. So anyways, that's really my perspective. How do you build the internal community structure for clients so they are able to seek support from people throughout their career after they find the job, or if they happen to be unable to work with a professional after a period of time? So the wonderful thing about my community is that it's like a network of alumni. So when my clients come to my program, they actually build relationships with other executives. And that is very helpful, okay? For multiple reasons. First of all, the way my program is designed is it's not just me talking to you, because I actually don't believe there is as much value of just working with a coach one-on-one and not, being part of a peer network. Think about like university, think about, going from an MBA, right? People actually pay a lot of money to get an MBA, most of the time, not for the education and what they're going to learn in the MBA program. It's actually to have access to a network, okay? There are a few things that happen when you are in a learning environment with peers. Your learning accelerates by 5 times because you are watching someone who's struggling with what you're struggling, and you're seeing it on the outside, versus when you're just working one-on-one with a coach, it's internal. You don't see your blind spots. But in a classroom setting, when you see another student, let's say struggling with their story or trying to improve their executive presence, you also have the opportunity to give them feedback and teach them. That accelerates your learning, okay? So that's number one. The second thing that happens in my program is that sometimes when we are putting our head down and we're at work and we're constantly focused on getting the work done, we almost weaken our networking muscle. I have an executive client, a VP of finance. We were working together last year, and she was so terrified of going to networking events. She felt awkward about it. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She felt like if she had to go to a networking event, especially outside of her space, that it would, she wouldn't belong in the room. And so she got better at it. She got better at networking because she had the opportunity to practice within my community, to talk to strangers, to talk to peers who are not necessarily inside her domain. And so she messaged me like a couple of weeks ago and said that now she's going to these networking events and they feel very comfortable. The thing about networking is you need to feel comfortable building relationships. And some of you, when you think about networking, you think about, I'm going to send a long email on LinkedIn attaching my resume. That is not networking. That is making an ask. That is being salesy. Networking is learning how to build a relationship. If you don't have a network, then you need to learn how to be a relationship builder. It is a skill set. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what your point is, Edward, in terms of I think an internal external support structure and accountability could incorporate guidance from a tool. Like I said, to each their own. Personally, my style when I work with my clients is we talk. I'm old fashioned. I don't like texting. I like phone calls. I don't like to, I don't know, give my clients templates and AI tools and just, they just go through them and never talk to me. Because, like I said, the types of clients who come to me value relationship building because as an executive, you need to be great at building relationship and communication. Talking to an AI tool does not help you develop your relationship building muscle because when you're in a workplace, you're not talking to AI tools, you're talking to human beings. Even if you are a staff engineer or a developer, you still have to talk to human beings. You have to learn how to deal with politics. You have to learn how to deal with conflict. So if I were to have tools for my clients only, then that's not going to help them develop their communication skill set. In fact, in some of my sessions, we do storytelling exercises. There was, one exercise where it was an improv exercise, and each of my clients basically contributed to building a story. It's about teamwork. Yeah, I'm very great at building communities, and that's why my program is successful because first of all, how you build a community is by really focusing on building your brand. And this is how I built my business, right? People come to me because they see my values through my content. And so, how you build great relationships is by telling your story and showcasing your values. And when you are able to do that, you're going to be attracting like minded people. And this is how you build the strong relationships. And the concept actually translates to how you land a job as well. When you're very honest about what you care about and what you value, then this is where the alignment is created. This is where you attract opportunities aligned to the way you think versus fake who you are, put up with your situation, and you end up being miserable because you experience misalignment, right? So you need to be really good at expressing your value through your content. And don't take content literally. Every time I say content, people think, oh, I have to create content on LinkedIn. I have to post things on LinkedIn. Content, meaning any type of messaging, whether it's a conversation, whether it is a LinkedIn post, whether it's your resume, the content that you create needs to express your values clearly. It needs to tell your story in order to attract the right people. Okay. And this is something that I help my clients with. Okay. So I feel like that's pretty much what I want to say in terms of my framework. If you are in a bad situation or in a situation that is very stagnant and you're not getting the results that you want to create options for yourself, then what I recommend you do is book a career diagnosis with me. Like I shared with you, the reason I am really good at this is it's just the life circumstances that I went through. I came to Canada at the age of 18 and I was forced. I was forced to build my career without a network. My family, both of my parents never came to Canada. I came here alone. And so I was forced to develop that muscle. And after that, I further developed this muscle through my business. I don't really advertise, I create content. Mostly people who are strangers, find me on LinkedIn because I'm really good at building my brand and I'm able to communicate my value clearly. So if you're sick and tired of limiting yourself because you feel that you don't have the network, I really encourage you to not give up because it is possible to change your situation. And I'm opening up my calendar for you if you'd like to have a conversation and need the professional help to change your situation. So it is a 15-minute, free career diagnosis to inquire about my services and how it would work if we work together. I don't work with every single person who reaches out to me. But at a minimum, in this 15-minute conversation, you are going to get a lot of value. You are going to have a plan. You're going to know whether your goal is attainable. And yeah, if you are the kind of person who values professional help, you want to do it the right way, then we can talk about what it would be like to work together. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how to book the call. It's very simple. So if you go into my LinkedIn profile and click on the book an appointment button, there is a video that you can watch. It shares my story in more depth as well as client testimonials. And then you can click the book your career diagnosis button. It only takes 2 minutes to fill out this form, and it also helps me understand your situation more clearly because 15 minutes is not a lot of time, and it's important for me to understand the context so that I can help you, okay? Once you complete this, then you're going to be able to pick a spot on my calendar. All right? Okay. I hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Do me a favor, Edward, I really love your participation, and Emmanuel too. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. And if there's anyone else who's listening, say hi. Pop something in the chat so that I know that you're listening. Whether it's where you're tuning from, I'm always curious, like who is listening to my lives? What country? Because LinkedIn doesn't tell me. And if you really want to be helpful, then I would appreciate a like. Like doesn't cost you anything. And it also helps someone who is in a bad situation see this, because that's how LinkedIn, pushes it to people, right, who need help. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. And till next time, I hope you guys have a wonderful night.